Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Top of the morning to you. I'm not really in the mood for a Magnum today. It's probably just as well, because it'd be impossible to get one via the Tesco website. It's strange, the stories that provide us with fresh insights, isn't it? Insights into just how serious the situation is becoming. I'm not a fully qualified economist, but I do know that Unilever is an Anglo-Dutch company that trades essentially in euros. So every pound of profit they make is shrinking every time the pound goes down against the euro. Their costs are going up. This is not, well, it's not even remotely difficult to understand. And when a company's costs go up, they pass those costs to the customer. So, even if you were somehow able to make Marmite or biscuits or tea bags without importing ingredients from abroad, the idea that you can make tea bags without importing tea is, well, revolutionary, really. Presumably you've got one of those decks like on Star Trek, so the tea doesn't have to travel here all the way from Sri Lanka or Malaysia or wherever it may be. You just sit in your factory in Manchester, press a button, and then tons of tea arrives without incurring transport costs, which will almost always involve fuel, which will almost always involve oil, which will almost always be priced by the dollar, which of course has just seen massive rises against the pound. So do you remember earlier this week, or was it last week? I can't tell, it's all blurring into one now, when the British Petrol Association, the Retailers Association, said that the price of petrol was going to go up, and we just reflected on how every single one of us is going to have to dig a little bit deeper simply to fill up the tank. The same amount of petrol will cost more money. Guess what? It's true for business as well. So if you're delivering raw materials needed to make Marmite, even if you're growing them in Somerset and delivering them to Scunthorpe, you are now paying more money to do that because of what's happened to the pound. Tesco, incidentally, of course, is also responsible for keeping the price of milk so low that dairy farmers rely upon European Union subsidies to simply stay afloat. Still haven't been told what's going to happen to those subsidies when we leave. So the idea that Tesco today becomes the champion of the shopper or something like that is remarkable. 6 minutes after 10. And these are just facts that we're dealing with at the moment, OK? So if you want to understand why Unilever is doing what it's doing, you need to understand three very simple things. It's a euro-based company. It's Anglo-Dutch, so all of their holdings are in euros. When the pound does badly, they lose money. The second thing you need to understand is you can't do business in this country without spending money in other currencies. You literally can't get from A to B without petrol. And oil is a dollar-based commodity, so when the pound does badly against the dollar, oil and petrol costs more. The energy companies today are announcing that their cheapest deals are going to be abolished, probably for the same reason. What is beginning to become almost a national emergency is the attempts by some people in the media to pretend that this isn't their fault. It's an astonishing, almost like a Mexican standoff that's been achieved now. You know, and I know, that epic amounts of effort went into persuading people to vote to leave the European Union. And the greater the effort, the less the knowledge, the less the information that you were given. Anybody who said, well, hang on a minute, if this happens, then that will happen, was accused of talking the country down or indulging in Project Fear. Even the Daily Mail's given up on trying to find any good news now. It's just complaining about the BBC reporting facts. It's just complaining about the BBC reporting news and sort of saying, well, you should be pretending that things aren't looking bad. That's even the Daily Mail's given up on actually reporting good news. Why? Because you can't. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible now what is happening, because not only do you see the decline in our economy, but you see the denial coming from the people responsible for it. It's not even complicated. It's not even complicated. You told me I'd be better off. If I'd believed you, I'd be furious now. But then I'm not maybe made like other people are. I'd be furious with the people that had lied to me. I'd be really, really cruel. You told me I'd be better off. Even if you told me there was going to be some short-term pain for a long-term gain, and I didn't really know what you meant by it, I didn't realise you meant that my weekly shop was going to go up so much so quickly. But you don't get cross with the people that lied to you. It's not the nature of the mob. You get cross with the people who are making you feel stupid for believing the lies. That's the nature of the mob. Always has been, always will be. I mean, even the Lily Allen story today proves it, doesn't it? The Taliban are diametrically opposed to young women being independently minded and speaking their thoughts. The Taliban hate it, OK? I could open up the phone lines now and form a queue of people here who also hate it and think that Lily Allen is disgraceful for speaking her mind. God damn Lily Allen for actually travelling to Calais to meet people and look at a situation before forming an opinion about it. Doesn't she know she could get all her opinions straight from the Mail online? She doesn't need to actually go there and meet people and see things and demonstrate compassion. Do you think the Taliban are our enemy? And then you have people in Britain queuing up to condemn a young woman for having independence of thought and freedom of speech. That's what the Taliban do. But again, fingers in ears, denialism, denialism, denialism. The other sort of element of this conversation today is actually what it would take for people to realise that the problems we've got are not only immense but also self-inflicted. When does the, what do you call it, the sort of rose-tinted spectacle approach fail? At what point do people actually have to say, oh God, yeah, sorry mate, I got this one completely wrong. I had no idea that this was going to happen. I had no idea that this was going to happen. I'm really sorry. There's one newspaper today talking about the Unilever story. Phone lines are open, by the way. I'm not really asking questions today. I just thought we'd have a chat in the hope of making ourselves feel a little bit better. 0345 6060973 is the number to call. Looking at this line here, it appears to be blaming the Brexit vote and the resulting weak pound. However, analysts said many of the products involved in the dispute are made in Britain from ingredients produced here. How much contempt would I have to hold you in? As a journalist who believes his job is to tell people truth, even if it's an uncomfortable truth. Actually, do you know what? In this day and age, especially if it's uncomfortable truth. Two types of journalists in Britain. People who tell you what you want to hear, people who tell you what you need to hear. I'm afraid, in the latter category at the moment. I might veer back into the former category when things have calmed down a bit, but right now I'm here to tell you the things you need to hear. And when they write in a national newspaper that the analysts are pointing out that the ingredients are produced here, they are calling you stupid. They are calling you dumb. They are saying, well, we can convince them this has got nothing to do with Brexit by pointing out that, the biscuits are being made with sugar and flour that have come from elsewhere in Britain. How do they get from the field to the factory? Oh, no, they're too stupid to worry about that. Seriously, tell him that tea bags are British. How does the tea get from India to Britain? No, don't worry about that. In the factory where they're making the biscuits, where does the fuel come from that powers the ovens? Where does that oil come from? What currency is it paid? Oh, don't worry about that. They're too stupid. They're really stupid, the British people. They're really, really stupid. And we can pretend that this has got nothing to do with what we've just told them to do. And they'll believe us. They'll be queuing up to believe us because the alternative is too bleak. The alternative would be to realise that they'd been mugged, both financially and actually politically. It's a nasty story, and it's a relative. I just have a strange fascination with retail and the way in which it works. But this is what is happening, right? Unilever, because of what's happened to the pound, is losing money, as it were, or making less money. Their job, whether you like it or not, it's amazing how many cheerleaders for capitalism have suddenly got a problem with how capitalism works this morning. Their job is to plug those holes to get the money back. And they do so by charging more for what they sell in the territories where the currency is plummeting, i.e. us. That's it. And you can't make anything in this country without oil. You can't make anything without buying stuff, often from abroad. So I don't know what question to ask you today. 0345 6060973 is the number you need if you've already heard one that you want to answer. Because it's not even a debate, this. It's where we are. It's like the Trumpification of British politics. It's not even a debate about whether or not the plummeting pound is responsible for what Unilever is doing and other suppliers will follow now. Seriously, it's not even a debate. But if I had just spent 3 months, 4 months, 2 years lying to you, And I'm quite a well-informed guy. Most people in this business are. So if you're reading a newspaper column or listening to a pundit, watching a pundit on the telly, I think they know they're lying to you. This is the big mystery for me now. If someone sits here today and says, oh, it's ridiculous, it's the ingredients are made in Britain, how can the plummeting pound have anything to do with that? I honestly don't know whether they're in a form of sort of psychological turmoil and desperately trying to construct some plausible deniability, whether they're too stupid to understand what is black and white and completely clear in front of them, or whether they just don't care. And they're still, I mean, how does it work? I'm still selling newspapers. I'm still putting bums on seats, still getting clicks. And I'm lying to them all, and they don't realise. They're still blaming the people who said this was going to happen. What do you think is going on? There you go. That's my complicated question this morning. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. You can email james at lbc.co.uk. You can text 84850. There'll be a bit of give and take on this. I don't think the supermarket is going to be able to survive without Unilever's goods, and I don't think Unilever is going to be able to survive in its current form without having its goods on the shelves in the supermarket. So there'll be some give and take. But in the way that it goes at the moment, the constant suggestion that bad things happening to Britain have nothing to do with what we voted for on June the 23rd. I guess the question I'm asking you today is, at what point, if you're sensible and relatively rational, at what point are you going to realise that maybe, and please God, 5-10 years down the line, things are almost as good as they were before. But at what point are you going to realise they're not going to be better? 0345 6060 970. What's it going to take? What's it actually going to take for the truth to become the news rather than the propaganda? I don't know, and I do this for a living. I actually don't know. What is it going to take for people to... I mean, I'm getting quiet a lot now, emails, tweets, texts, telling me that I did it for this reason and that reason, and I've never felt so stupid in my life. And those are sort of relatively normal, level-headed people. On the other side of the argument, you'll have people with their fingers in their ears who are just shouting, the kind of people today who are going, it's disgusting, these biscuits, they're made in Britain, how can the plummeting pound make them cost more? And that's fine if you're not a professional. If you just, look, it's our job to give you information. And when we start giving you actual duff information to back up and defend the fact that we've been lying to you for years, then I'm afraid my profession bears more responsibility for the current mess than the retailers and the wholesalers do. Phone lines are off the hook. I don't know why. I haven't even asked you a question yet. We'll find out after this. 10:19 is the time. It is probably the worst example yet of the people who, possibly through misinformation and good intention, lied to you in the run-up to the referendum vote, have to double down on their lies today. Otherwise, they'd have to say sorry to you. So when Unilever report that their costs are going up, their income is going down because they're a euro-traded company, Anglo-Dutch company, that also, of course, needs epic amounts of oil that will be traded in dollars, and raw materials that they'll have to be buying and bringing into Britain. When they announce that, and everybody concludes it's linked to the fact that the pound is plummeting as a result of how the markets have responded to the fear that we're going to have a so-called hard Brexit, it's just fact. But if you had been conned, or I had been conning you for the last few months, I'd have to pretend it wasn't. I'd have to carry on lying. I'd have to double down on the lie, however stupid it made me sound. The question that this country faces at the moment is, are the British people going to go along with it? Are the British people going to go along with the doubling down on lies by the people who lied to them in the first place? I don't know. I've got a feeling they will go along with it, but hey, what do I know? Phil's in Ruislip. Phil, what's on your mind?
Hi, James. I run a small business. We import from the US and we import from Europe. And literally, I imported a container from the US, I would say a couple of weeks before Brexit. I had to then import another one, identical contents. After Brexit, it cost me an extra 10 grand. Now, I cannot, on that basis, keep my prices the same.
Do you know, I can't even believe you need to ring in to tell me this. Do you see what I mean about the current climate?
Yeah.
I can't even believe that somebody like you, small business, simple explanation, costs, it needs to be pointed out to people because they're so, well, what are they? Their heads are so far up their backsides that they don't know what day it is, or they're just so terrified that they've actually made an awful mistake they don't want to hear? Because you're talking the country down now by simply telling me how much more it costs for you to import a container from America than it did 4 months ago. You are talking the country down.
I've had this problem with many people I've spoken to. You try and explain it to them, say, look, you know, the fact that the pound is worth less now than it was, you know, before Brexit.
168-year low we hit yesterday. I don't know if you caught that. 168-year low.
Absolutely. Because of my business, I have to keep a very keen eye on the euro and the dollar, you know, against the pound. And literally, this is causing massive problems. Now, what happens here is, and what's the word? The end product of this is that I sell to British business. Now, they buy my products that I import from the US and Europe, and before anyone says, there is no manufacturer of this product in the UK.
That's going to be the next argument, isn't it? I don't know what product it is. You can tell me as much detail as you want or don't want, but the next argument, this is what they'll have to do next, is they'll have to say, well, why can't we make it here then?
Well, unfortunately, I think, you know, that was all determined in the early 80s, but there you go.
This is the ultimate Little Englander, isn't it now? We've reached peak Little England, which is we don't need the rest of the world. We don't need your Marmite. We don't need your widgets. We don't need your microchips. We're going to make everything ourselves, even though we haven't got any production capacity at all at this point in time.
Absolutely. And you know what? The products we bring in are glass. They're glass bottles. So we sell to breweries. We sell to various other, places that buy glass. And the point is the glass. So there are a couple of manufacturers in the UK, but glass is made of sand, and the sand does not come from the UK.
What's wrong with British sand, you traitor? What sort of a treacherous remain? What's the word? Brimona are you with your foreign sand?
Quite simply, it's not good enough.
I've been to Great Yarmouth. There's sand in British beaches, and you go and use the dirty foreign stuff, you traitor.
Well, there you go. But
that's where we are.
It's not me. I don't do the manufacturing. I literally am a wholesaler. But the products that we buy, you cannot get them in the UK. We're pretty much the only wholesaler of them in the UK. It's a specialist niche product. And our prices go up, which means that our customers suffer, which means that is then passed on to the consumer at a retail level.
But this is basic arithmetic. This isn't even politics. This is so straightforward. Unilever might be chancing their arm a little bit. I mean, they could have sucked up 7% instead of 10%, and probably they will end up negotiating something with Tesco.
Yeah.
But your costs go up. Your customers have to pay a little bit more for your product. It's not even sort of complicated.
Exactly, and the running costs of a small business, you've got to kind of have a level of profit where you're bringing in enough money to pay for all those costs and make enough to pay yourself.
I've got loads of people queuing up. I just want to run something else by you quickly. Even if you could use British sand, even if you could do it all here, you would then also need, of course, manufacturing equipment, which probably isn't manufactured in this country, so you'd have to buy that using euros or dollars. You'd need to transport the sand from Great Yarmouth to Ruislip or wherever your new bottling factory is. Even if you could get the ingredients in this country, which you can't, the performance of the pound would still be taking a massive chunk out of your revenues.
Was an issue. Absolutely.
What do you hear then? What do you hear when you hear? And some of them are quite, professional. Some of them, I think, even went to school. When you hear people queuing up to say things like this is, let me read you this line here, analysts, and when they don't name an analyst or use quotation marks, always be a little bit suspicious. Analysts said many of the products involved in the dispute are made in Britain from ingredients produced here. That's willful ignorance, right? That's deliberate deception of the public.
Well, that is, it definitely is, and I would go back to this thing of before Brexit. I think it was Michael Gove that said the British people are fed up with experts, don't we think? Whatever he said, and that's kind of to sum it up. That is where we're at. When I've got people telling me, "Oh, the pound is at an all-time low," that's really good for the country, actually. Then you just know that they're absolutely off their rocker and they've gone completely loopy.
No, but they're still sort of driving the bus, and they're still driving it towards the cliff, and they're still shouting at people sitting in the back saying, please don't drive towards this cliff, saying, shut up, you're talking the bus down. Please, just put the brake on. Just slow down. OK, let's just slow down. Oh, you're talking the country down. You're talking the bus down. It's crazy. It's actually crazy. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. And if you've gone wrong, if you've made this mistake, it may get better. This is the weirdest thing. I think the mindsets of the two sides are best illustrated by this simple observation. People who are very worried that we've done something really, really stupid really want to be wrong. Really want to be. I got a tweet today saying, "Why are you so happy about it?" I replied, I said, "I am furious about it." They said, "Why are you furious?" "Because your trips to the Euro are going to cost you, your trips to Europe are going to cost you more. What about the people who can only afford to go to Skegness?" And I thought, this is like banging your head against 7 brick walls. I replied and I said, "No, I'm furious because soon the people who can only afford to go to Skegness won't be able to." There's nothing wrong with Skegness, by the way, for the record. It's been a lovely, lovely few days there many years ago. And that's the point. Is that people who are worried we've done something really stupid desperately want to be wrong. But the mindset of some, not all, but the mindset of some on the other side is because you attribute to us the way your own personality works, because you think we must be somehow like you say, "Oh, you love it, you're really glad that things are going badly." No, it's terrifying and infuriating. But because you are so twisted and weird, you think we're like you. And that when we see our own shopping go up in cost, you think we're going to be pleased about it. When we see our own country circling the plug hole, you think we're going to be pleased about it because it proves we were right in the run-up to the ref. No, that's not how normal people operate. That's not how rational people work. Rational people don't want bad things to happen to them, but they tend to get a little bit frustrated with people who voted for bad things to happen to all of us and continue to deny any responsibility or even to display any vague understanding of reality. It's coming up to 10:30. I've got a feeling that we might do 2 hours on this, but it depends entirely on you. As I bid farewell to Phil, it frees up another phone line, 0345 6060 973. What I'm interested in is what you think the tipping point might be for the kind of person listening to this now who's about to ring in and say, "Oh, we've got to start manufacturing our own stuff," or "we can export jam," or "it's good for exports." What would it take? Now that the cost of your shopping basket is potentially going to rocket, the cost of your fuel is already going up, the cost of your holiday is going to increase. Most airports now are giving less to the pound. Yeah, it's gone down. You get less than €1 to the pound now in most. And I know, don't ever buy your currency at airports, but if you do today, you're going to get less than €1, less than €1 for your pound. What would it take, do you think? If you despise my kind of positioning on this over the weeks, at what point do you think you'll go, "Oh man, sorry, James"? What would it take if not the bottom line, if not your own pocket, if not your weekly shopping, if not your fuel, if not your kids' chances of having a top-class teacher at university because there's a brain drain underway now, Canada hoovering up top academics and research grants? What do you think it would take? Just park your animosity towards me for a moment and tell me what would it take for you to go, "Ah, my bad." And, well, I don't know what question I'm asking you today. It boils down roughly to something like, what the hell is going on? At what point will you realise that your personal financial situation is going to get a hell of a lot worse? There's a chance it might get better. Please God it gets better. Please God I'm wrong about everything. But what will it take for people who have been persuaded by propaganda and deception to harm themselves to start blaming the people who did the persuading rather than the people who were desperately trying to help them avoid it? Richard's in Hammersmith. Richard, what's on your mind?
Well, James, I just wanted to say that I am a retailer. Unfortunately, you're not wrong in what you're saying. And next year, consumers are going to have an almighty shock.
Traitor. Stop talking the country down, you treasonous wretch.
Let me just tell you that the majority, or the vast majority, of what people find on the high streets has its origins outside of this country. But I also wanted to touch on the point about Unilever, because I'm a little bit surprised. Whilst I'm not surprised at the conversation they're having, I am surprised at the timing.
Yes.
Because I would have thought that a company like Unilever would have hedged their currencies, and therefore they would not be looking to put up prices for at least March next year. So I'm a little bit surprised at the timing. So there's something behind this.
There's probably a little bit of business strong arming, and you can hedge against currency fluctuations. Of course you can. But do you honestly think anybody expected the pound to tank quite as much as it has?
Well, I did speak out before the referendum, and I did explain it to people, but it fell on deaf ears.
Yes, that's because you were part of Project Fear, you see.
That's right, and you know, it's straightforward economic fact that
Yes, but we've had enough of experts in this country, Richard.
I know. But you know what's interesting is that you've asked the question: what would it take for people to realise and accept they've made a mistake? Unfortunately, you're banging your head against a brick wall, because there are a huge number of the people that voted for Brexit would prefer to see a little England rather than a Great Britain, and so I'm afraid they will forever make excuses and forever blame other people.
Some will, but don't you think? I mean, I'm a great believer in the people of this country, and I may be naively, I reserve my ire and my anger and my disgust for the people who punt this nonsense, the kind of person who might today be trying to claim that Unilever products don't involve any employment of foreign currency, that you can make a biscuit in Britain without needing oil that's traded in dollars, or just conveniently ignoring the fact that Unilever is a euro-registered, euro-listed company because it's Anglo-Dutch. But I reserve my anger for them. I don't know that I quite share your bleak outlook, although I haven't looked in the box of trolls yet today, that people actively would choose to be worse off if they thought that it increased the likelihood of their neighbour being the same ethnicity as them.
Well, you mentioned yesterday the fact that people would prefer a bad law with British fingerprints,
yes,
a good law with German, and I think you've answered the question yourself. You know, you may believe in British people, but I'm not sure that you really do, and I'm afraid the vote to leave was based on. Sadly, was based on your belief that being correct, that human nature at the moment is not very nice, and I'm afraid that we've allowed people to vent their xenophobic frustrations and beliefs in a way that previous generations we weren't allowed to. You know, when people.
Well, that was political correctness. You're referencing all my greatest hits at the moment, Richard. That was political correctness that stopped people from venting, or moral correctness, as I now prefer to call it, morally correct behaviour, i.e. treating others as you would hope to be treated yourself. And he's right as well. You can see the apotheosis of it on the front pages today, with Lily Allen getting a kicking for having the audacity to actually travel to Calais and meet people before arriving at her conclusions about those people, complaining about people who have been victims of the Taliban and getting attacked for being a young woman with an open mind employing free speech. It's surreal where we are at the moment, but Richard's possibly right. I'm clinging on to a little bit of optimism, because I think when you show people, when you actually show them the truth, the scales will fall from their eyes. Most people. Obviously, there are some exceptions. Let me see if I can find something. So here's one. It's strange how you're so worried about prices going up when you admitted you voted to stay in because of racism, nothing to do with prices. So I guess, Nick in Cambridge, whatever you think you're going on about, you are providing evidence that some people will never see the scales fall from their eyes. Richard, thank you. A couple of phone lines free. Don't hold back. 0345 606 0973. If you want to explain why we've got this horribly wrong and there's nothing to worry about, I really would bite your arm off today. Again, I'll say it. This is a personality difference between people like that fella in Cambridge who just tweeted me and people like me. I want to be wrong. I derive no pleasure whatsoever in learning today that your shopping is going to go up by X%, or that your petrol is going to go up by X%, or that it's absolutely demonstrable that this is linked to the performance of the pound, which the markets have deserted in response to the genuine belief that Theresa May is going to go for hard Brexit. The one glimpse of optimism I've got is that she's playing an absolute blinder. And she's trying to spook the people that she's going to be negotiating with. She's got no intention whatsoever of throwing the country off a cliff in this way, but she's making our partners in Europe believe that she might go that far. So in order to sort of ensure that that doesn't happen and that Spanish people will still be able to sell us their tomatoes, she's just sort of holding up the worst case scenario as a negotiating tactic. Yeah, maybe. Nadeem is in Doncaster. Nadeem, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi James. I just simply can't disagree with anything you've said. I mean,
that's a bit boring. Go on, try.
Well, let me just say this. I put some fuel in my car yesterday, and I was trying to work out how much more I paid yesterday compared to a week ago, and it was I worked it out to be around £6. And then just got up this morning and saw the whole Unilever and Tesco debacle taking place and the potential increase in pricing. And I was listening to Ed Miliband during on Wednesday, and he basically said, people may actually have these views in relation to immigration, but our economy is going to fall off a cliff. And in Ed Miliband's own constituency, 70% of people voted to leave.
They did, right where you are now, up in Doncaster.
Yeah, that's exactly where I am. And
well, let's just break that down for me a little bit, just in terms of your view as a man on the ground. And I don't know whether from your name you'd be exposed to the kind of xenophobia in a way that's different from the majority of Doncaster voters. But just in terms of whatever they thought they were voting for, when the cost of the shopping goes up, Doncaster's got epic problems with poverty. It's parts of Doncaster are among the poorest in the land. When their cost of living continues to go up, will any pennies drop, or will the fact that they are more like they've somehow been sold the notion that there's going to be less immigration, will that keep them, metaphorically speaking, will that keep them warm at night?
Well, I think eventually the penny will drop. I mean, the question is when exactly is that point? I mean, the point that I would make, James, is in Doncaster, there are areas, there are neighbourhoods. You're absolutely right. There's some of these poorest neighbourhoods in the country. But if you, for example, live, and I've tried to work this out. I'm somebody in Doncaster who's dealt with over 300 cases of racism. That's what I used to coordinate. That's what I used to actually do for a living. And I actually took them to an effective resolution. And but Doncaster only has a black ethnic minority profile of about 3.4%. So whenever I heard, immigrants are taking our jobs, or immigrants are taking our housing, blah, 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 I used to think, well, there's only 3%. Even if it was an absolute, it could only be 3%. Yeah. It couldn't go beyond that figure. So
how big an impact can 3% of the population have on anything? But every time you're sitting in the doctor's waiting room and the person sitting next to you is speaking in an Eastern European accent, it's conclusive proof that we're overrun and can't cope.
Totally. And the point for me where I started to actually work out, trying to understand the grievance. Why are people so grieved? Yes. And why do they actually blame somebody of a different ethnicity or a different accent or whatever? And I started to realise that whenever I went into specific neighbourhoods, so there's a neighbourhood called Hexhall, I went into that neighbourhood and I spoke to people who had lived there for the last 50, 60, 70 years. And they told me, because look, our house prices have actually gone down. And I said, okay, right, your house prices have gone down. People next door came, lived here, they've moved on, they're doing now better than me. If you're actually subject to that decade after decade after decade, you're eventually going to have a grievance because your life is changing. So the question there is, well, there's 2 points. One, what's the local council doing in terms of connecting with those people? Why are these people always at the bottom of the scale when it's in relation to health inequalities, economic inactivity, levels of crime, antisocial behaviour, etc.? And
well, in a way, you've answered your own question. The reason why they don't get the help that they need in some of the poorest parts of the country is because the politicians have been let off the hook by the anti-immigration rhetoric. So rather than saying the reason that my life is not good is because they're not spending on infrastructure. I've got no investment in my part of town. Government doesn't intervene in industry anymore. All of these things are true. All of these things that you could be held accountable for, but they're not being held accountable because they've got someone whispering in their ear, it's all the fault of the immigrants, all 3.4% of them.
Yeah, totally agree. And, the point that you make in terms of accountability is absolutely on point. My own view is, particularly in relation to this Brexit, that eventually this country will realise they've been hoodwinked. If you want to actually have a single island mentality when we're living in a globalised world, then eventually
I don't know. We are currently living in a globalised world, but I suspect there's a significant constituency of the people you describe who feel that they have quite rightly voted to leave the 21st century. Nadeem, I'm going to crack on. I've got so many calls and I haven't spoken to many people today, so we'll keep this up for 2 hours. Just an example of the kind of attitude that we're trying to unpick today. This is a tweet from someone who calls himself Balder the Brave. He says, I think your first caller was ripped off. We are still in the EU. Why did someone charge him £10,000 extra? Well, because the seller was dealing in dollars and the buyer was dealing in sterling. So the performance of sterling versus the dollar has been so dire that it now costs him £10,000 more to buy exactly the same product that he bought before the pound tanked. And I'm sorry, I have to be able to explain stuff like that to you without sounding patronising. I think it's obvious, and I suspect that you probably know that, and you're pretending not to. But just in case you really did just need a heads up on that, my pleasure. It's 10:45. Mark writes, James, my brother works for a big refurbishment company. Wood and materials have all gone up since the vote. My brother now tells me that most of his work colleagues voted leave. However, with the rise in the price of materials and fuel, they're realising they may have voted themselves out of a job. He thinks there will be losses soon. This is going to get ugly. Stop talking the country down. And Dave texted to say, stop scaremongering. I was scaremongering when I reported experts suggesting that things might go bad for the pound after leaving the European Union. That was scaremongering. And now that they are going bad for the pound, reporting that fact is scaremongering as well. That's what you're up against if you're a journalist who believes in telling people what they need to know rather than what they want to hear. And oddly enough, this is not, I mean, the radio we're doing at the moment, and the reason why it's hitting viral million levels on an almost daily basis is not because of the people who see sense in what I say. It's everybody else I'm talking to. I am furious on your behalf. I watched people in my profession persuade you to act against your own interests. I watched newspapers dedicate page upon page upon page of propaganda in order to get you to do something that, yeah, the arguments on the other side weren't strong enough to dissuade you, but in order to get you to do something that you didn't really know why you were doing it. Phrases like take back control without knowing what it meant. Phrases like make Britain great again without actually wanting personally to believe that Britain has ever ceased to be anything but great, and ignoring, of course, the fact that that word is only there to distinguish us from Brittany and has nothing to do with greatness in the conventional sense whatsoever. It's the people who've been lied to. That's why I get so cross. I'll be all right. I'm middle class. I'm insulated from a lot of this. I work in a profession that, oddly enough, only gets affected pretty early on by declines in advertising revenues and things like that. But people will always need radios. They'll always have voices coming out of them. I'll be okay. I'll be okay. Look, I'm going to be worse off if I ever go shopping or fill the car up with petrol. But I'll be okay. And all this talk about, oh, it's all right for you lot, it's the other way round. Seriously, the crosser you get with me, the more blind you are to the fact that it's your plight I'm cross about. I'm cross about you being sold lies. I'm not cross about you buying them. I've got no beef with you, boxer trolls notwithstanding, obviously, when you're dealing with sociopaths and sort of textbook weirdos, that normal rules don't apply. But everybody else, it's on your behalf that decent people are now cross. And what are all the liars doing? Telling us to shut up. Yesterday's front pages, silence. The Express said, silence the whingers. Damn them, said the Mail. The people who are actually saying to you, if you happen to have swallowed this crud, mate, it's not too late. We can do something. We can operate as a country. We can act in our own best interests. Moving forward, we can do something. I don't know what, but we can do something. And then the people who sold you the lies tell people like me to shut up. Just think about that for a minute. What happened to freedom of speech? I thought this was all about freedom, this vote. I thought it was all about freedom and independence. Stop pointing out that things are going badly. Just take a moment out of your morning to run by me how that is an evocation of freedom or independence. Silence the EU whingers. Damn the unpatriotic brimonas. These are on actual newspaper front pages. Didn't think I'd see that in my lifetime. Pointing out problems has become an act of unpatriotic behaviour. Pointing out problems is unpatriotic. If pointing out problems is unpatriotic, we're halfway to fascism. And I haven't even mentioned the hate crime spike that you'll hear in your news bulletin in 7 minutes' time. Johnny's in Limehouse. Johnny, help me out here. I'm feeling bleak.
Hello, James.
Hello,
First
Johnny.
time call up.
You're very welcome.
I've been listening over 10 years, mate.
Good man, thank you.
Right, I'm one of the idiots who voted out.
Not an idiot.
And,
You're not an idiot. You're not an idiot. You believed people that you trust.
I believe people that not only who's in the financial, the hierarchy, what we've been listening to over the last year or so to vote out, also friends who work in banking industries who said to me, no, you need to vote out. You need to vote out because, it's going to be in our best interest. There'll be more jobs for us. There'll be blah, 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 blah. and it's just turned out to be a load of old rubbish, really, isn't it?
Well, I hope not. I genuinely hope I'm horribly, horribly wrong and that things get better sooner rather than later and we end up even better off than we would before. But you remind us of something that they're trying to erase from history, Johnny. The idea that only 4 months ago people were telling you would be better off by now.
Yeah. Well, I'm not being funny. I'm on a wage anyway, James.
Yes.
I'm not in business. I'm on a wage. But I'm going to notice it when I want to go out and get a pot noodle from Asda's, isn't I, you know?
Yes, of course you are. You're going to notice it when you fill up the car with petrol. You're going to notice it if you go on holiday abroad. You're going to notice it if you buy anything that needs to be transported. You're going to notice it because oil is priced in dollars, and we're at yesterday briefly, we're at a 168-year low on our effective exchange rate. 168 years, Johnny. You can't make this stuff up.
I just wish that I could go back and change my vote, because I would in an instant.
Well,
in an instant,
that's
I
the
would.
next chapter. How many people are like Johnny, I wonder?
I don't know. Probably not many. You'll probably find, because they'll be ignorant to think, no, we're right. We're going to stick to what we. It's going to all turn out okay. It's just basic rubbish.
Well, it's maths. It's arithmetic now. And don't ever call yourself an idiot. Not on my watch, all right? You just call yourself a victim, if you like, of dishonest journalism and dishonest dissemination, but never call yourself an idiot. Please, don't. 0345 606 0973 if you want Johnny's slot on the switchboard. John's in Watford. John, what would you like to say?
Well, I'm mourning the loss of democracy. I think the country's had a sort of very clever, ingenious coup.
Yeah, well, I think I can see why, but I'd like to hear your explanation.
Well, Mrs. May became Prime Minister. She was a Remainer. She didn't campaign on Brexit. She was, not a very strong Remainer, but she still gave a very strong speech in favour of Remain. She wasn't elected. Her government is a million miles away from David Cameron's government, which wanted us to stay in the EU. She wants to pass Brexit by bypassing Parliament. She wants to use a 13th century archaic royal prerogative instead of using the parliamentary method that we've had serve us well for hundreds of years. And I just feel that somehow we've had this Brexit vote dividing the country. It wasn't like the one in 1975 where the people voted 2-1 in favour of remaining. This was very divisive. It wasn't a decisive vote. And the point about democracy, I don't know what you think, but I think the point about democracy is that people are allowed to discuss things and to change their minds. And what will happen if people do change their mind? Will they have an opportunity to express that?
Well, you've seen some major newspapers now wanting to deny basic freedom of speech to people who insist on pointing out truth.
That really worries me. There
was a bloke in the Express yesterday who was saying that people should, I presume he thought he was being funny or ironical or something. He was saying people should be locked up in the Tower. They need to pay a price for their pessimism on a day that the pound reached a 168-year low.
Well, I don't want to be silenced. And let's face it, we're not talking about a small minority of people who wanted us to stay in the EU. It was just over 16 million. And in the speeches at the Conservative Party conference last week, what mention of us were there? I mean, she keeps talking about the 17 million, but it seems that we've been forgotten, the ones who voted for Remain. And maybe actually now there's enough people who've changed their mind that if we'd had the vote now, and I'm not suggesting we should have it again, but if we had it again, it may go the other way. And isn't that, as I said before, something that democracy allows?
Well, this is, I think, perhaps the problem that the country suffers from on a grander scale than people like you and I realised, is that when people on one side of an argument talk about democracy, they mean the opposite. They mean a sort of autocracy. They mean a sort of notion where dissent is not allowed, you know. You're not even allowed to go to Calais and meet refugees without getting a kicking from some people in the media and kicking from newspapers. So the idea that you would be pointing out that those people in the media and those newspapers are personally and professionally responsible for a countrywide catastrophe, potentially, well, no wonder they want us all to shut up. Well, you'll always have a platform here, John, I promise you. And if you think you're not being spoken for as someone who voted to remain in the European Union, how do you think old Johnny feels in Limehouse, who was on before you? He's already realised that he's been sold a complete pup. Where does he take it back to? Where does he get a refund? How does he complain? Who does he hold accountable for the fact that he believed their lies? Everything will be fine. Everything will be coming up roses. It's Project Fear. 168-year low. 168-year low. I'm going to say that again, actually, because all good things come in threes. It's a 100, or was briefly, a 168-year low. And I haven't even mentioned the €20 billion bill that our own experts estimate it's going to cost us to go through with this divorce. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It is really, really simple now. If things are not as bad as they appear, everyone can celebrate. We can all hug each other in Trafalgar Square. But if things are bad and poised to get worse, if anybody in my profession starts telling people, pointing it out, to shut up, it's fine for the public to do it. But once journalists start telling other journalists to stay silent, you move into incredibly frightening territory. And it's happening. And the journalists doing it are the journalists who have dedicated most of this year and previous years to portraying the European Union as some sort of evil empire. And of course it worked. So if they can't point to proof that they are right, what do they do instead? If they begin to feel that their lies are unravelling, what do they do instead? They've only really got two choices. They either put their hands up, say sorry, or they start calling for the people pointing out their calumnies and exaggerations to be somehow silenced. This is Great Britain in 2016. I just need to remind you of that. It's not sort of, pre-Mugabe Zimbabwe or anything like that. This is Great Britain in 2016, where mainstream newspapers and media outlets are calling for criticism to be suppressed. Criticism of reality. Criticism of facts. Daily Express and the Daily Mail yesterday contained words like damn them and their unpatriotic moaning, silence the whingers. And those are the newspapers that told you it was all going to be great. So even if you've got steam coming out of your ears at the moment because you hate what you're hearing, why would the people that told you it was all going to be great have such a massive problem now with people who are suggesting that perhaps it is not? That this is basic human psychology. Seriously. Why would the people who told you it was going to be brilliant be today encouraging you to help silence people pointing out that it isn't? It's not even complicated, is it? If there was good news to report, remember in the weeks afterwards you heard people talking about Brexit booms, and they take some story and cobble some nonsense from a meaningless anecdote and claim it was proof that Britain was going to go from strength to strength. You remember that, don't you? They've even given up on that now. They're not even doing that anymore. They're simply saying that people who are pointing at the emperor and saying that he's naked must be silenced. That's Great Britain in 2016. And I just wonder what it will take for your personal pendulum to swing. How long would I have to wait to feel better? To think, oh, crikey, thank goodness for that. And again, I stress again, this journalism, this broadcasting that we're doing at the moment is not about preaching to the choir. There might well be people who ring in who agree with me, but it's the people who will never ring in, who are sitting there slowly hearing a penny drop. That's what I'm doing it for. I don't enjoy. You heard the bloke on the phone the other day who threatened me when I was on holiday in France with my children. Actually threatened me personally, physically, in person. You think I like that? You think I do this because I enjoy all the negative attention that a tiny minority of people hurl at me on a daily basis? You think I enjoy having to pretend to my children that some violent thug hasn't just effectively threatened to throw me in the river? I hate it. Of course I do. Of course, it's the same man, by the way, who phoned up this radio station and told Nigel Farage to challenge me to a debate a few years ago. Same man. Got his name, got his number, know where he is. I don't do it for fun. I do it because I hate to see ordinary people being misled and deceived and lied to. On a personal level, I hate it. But on a historical level, I know where it leads. And the step in the path that sees journalists calling for other journalists to be silenced, that's quite far down the path. That's not like an early step on the path to really, really scary times. Silence the journalists. Do you know what's just happened in Hungary? They've shut a newspaper. An independent newspaper has just been shut down by the government because it was printing stories that were true. Hungary's a long way away. Sean's in Milton Keynes. Sean, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I agree with that previous caller before on the news, Johnny from wherever it was.
Limehouse,
basically, he knocked on the complete out of my sales. I was going to actually say exactly what he was going to say to me. I've got a 7-year-old. Friday, I sat him down and told him not to lie to me or lie to his teachers and say, look, the truth is always better out. Now, how can I explain to him that the politicians lied to me and I voted to leave, and now they're messing with my cup of tea which I've got in my hand? Because this tea in my hand is now going to cost me even more.
Yes.
To drink. And it's my favourite cup. They're starting to mess with my cup
You don't
of
take
tea.
sugar, do you?
Yes, I do.
Oh, no, it's just getting worse, Sean. It's getting worse and worse. Do you drink it black, or do you have a dash of milk in there?
Just a slight dash.
All right, we'll be all right on the milk then. But the tea, and I mean, it's good that we can still laugh and smile. I love the analogy of teaching your children to tell the truth while believing the lies that people who should know better are telling you. Who do you point at particularly? Who would you sort of think? Who did you feel persuaded by particularly during that process?
I think most of the politicians and maybe a bit of the media saying scaremongering about all this other stuff. I thought, hang on, yeah, okay, scaremongering, yeah. And I didn't believe that bastard for an instant.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I thought, hang on a minute, yeah, well, maybe that's are out. And I've got, my wife's an Indian. My wife is an Indian, so I'm not racist in the slightest. You know, I married an Indian lady.
Of course.
So I don't class myself as a racist at all.
No, I mean, this again is part of the process of trying to silence criticism. You say everybody, that people who are saying that we've got problems are labelling everyone who voted Leave as a racist. You know, I sat here in the mornings afterwards, every single day I opened the show with the same words. So I have family members and close friends, my daughter's godfather, all voted to Leave. None of them have a racist bone in their body. So to suggest that everybody who voted to Leave is a racist is nonsense. And you know, nobody does it except the people that you're describing. Except the liars. The liars, their latest lie is that everybody who criticises us thinks you're a racist. Everybody who complains about the fact that your cup of tea has gone up in cost, they think you're a racist. They all think you're a racist. They think you're a racist. You're a racist. It all comes from the other side. It's insane. It's actually, well, it'd be funny if it wasn't so tragic.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I got to see. I'm saying to my 7-year-old, the teacher you lied to doesn't like it. I don't like it. You're going to now sit with me over this coffee table.
Yeah.
Now, after dinner, and you're going to explain to me why you lied.
So
why can't I now go to my MP or someone that in politics and say,
or the media,
you're now going to sit on the media, sit in front of me and explain to me why you lied.
You told me the experts were lying, and they weren't. Yeah. Were you being unintelligent or were you being dishonest?
Exactly.
I don't know who you... There you go. Sean's nailed it. Who gets to answer that question? Who gets to answer that question? You never get the editors of the newspapers. They never go near proper scrutiny. I would love to interview some of these editors. Absolutely love to. You never see them. Never see them anywhere. Accountability. They write their articles about accountability. When's the last time someone like Sean had the chance to say to one of the commentators who told him that the experts were all lying, why did you do it? Why did you lie to me? Why did you persuade me to punch myself in the face? Why did you do it? Is it just because you get paid? Is it because Rupert Murdoch really does pull your strings? Is it because you're the xenophobe and you've whipped up a xenophobic feeling in the rest of the country and now you can't control it anymore? Why is there a presumption anywhere that people like Sean must be racist if they voted to leave the European Union? Why did you do it? I suppose if you present a phone-in show, you have to answer those questions at least occasionally. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Sean, mind how you go. Charles is in Oxford. Charles, what would you like to say?
So I was a Remain voter. I was completely devastated by the vote. I'm very saddened by some of the racism outbreaks in the country recently. But I've listened to you over the last hour, and I have to disagree on...
Good, thank God for that. Finally, Charles, finally. You take your time.
The issue is you've talked a lot about imports and how things are going to get more expensive. Yes, that's true. It is going to get more expensive. But if you're like me, you're a young entrepreneur trying to raise money for your company. You become very attractive to foreign investment when the pound falls. For other companies I know that have been really struggling with the high exchange rate, they're finally able to get a breath and start exporting again. I think you have to give the other side of the argument that this country is now going to be quite competitive. Politically, I'm devastated, but I see a lot of exciting opportunities on the economics.
I'd hand over all of today's wages if for you to be right. Seriously, I pray to God you're right.
A lot of your arguments today have been talking about the exchange rate. We have to remember that these are finance men speculating on the value of the pound. There hasn't been a political settlement yet.
No, and they're speculating on what they think the political settlement is going to be. I don't think we're in disagreement with each other on anything. I would probably like to be a little more optimistic, and I envy you that. But I think perhaps I have to point out that most of the people listening to this programme are not young entrepreneurs looking for international finance to help them start up their companies.
But who creates jobs in the world?
Well, in this country, the NHS is the NHS is the biggest employer in this country.
Well, we need to train young people, and if we want young people to have jobs, then we need to have a much more competitive exchange rate.
No, I'm not. Again, I say
the exchange rate was correct before Brexit.
Well, no, you're not having that, I'm afraid. I wish you well with your business, I really do. But a 168-year low. You're telling me the pound's been overvalued for 168 years?
No, but I'm saying that it's definitely been overvalued for the last few years in terms of, well, I can only speak for the people who I've talked to, but it's been very difficult to export recently.
It's been very difficult to export recently, and I hope it gets easier, but you'll allow me to point out that is not going to butter any parsnips or heat any homes of people who are working for big companies that are seeing their costs go up, people who are working for supermarkets that are going to have to start charging their customers more, people who are shopping in supermarkets who are going to have to start paying more. It's 11:15. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I can't fact check everything, obviously. Life's too short. But a few of you are pointing out that exports in many fields the highest that they'd ever been in the run-up in the year of 2015. I think we exported more cars. But the caller previous to the travel news, obviously referring to industries and sectors that he's more familiar with. So he says it was hard to export stuff, and it's now going to get easier with a weak pound. That's probably true. Whether or not the pound has really been overvalued for 168 years, though, is anybody's guess. 20 minutes after 11 is the time. John's in Northampton. John, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Hello, mate.
You know, James, I remember back in the late 60s, I think it was about 68 from memory, a long time ago.
I mean, it is.
I remember the news headlines, the pound is at an all-time low. It's going to fall to $2 to the pound.
Yes. God,
if we had $2 to the pound now, we'd all be off to Florida, wouldn't we? I've got friends in Spain who've got a small hotel, very worried about our low pound because it will affect them. And they don't have a currency that they can devalue, by the way of the peseta, which they'd love to have back. And I think that's probably the same in Portugal, Italy. And let's face it, it's who's pushing the pound down.
We're covering a lot of ground here. We're focusing on the... hopefully, I sense you're here with the 1968 reference. You're going to remind us that these things all come out in the wash.
Yes,
good.
They do.
No, I think that's an important reminder.
We're all a big roundabout, and it balances itself out. It did then, and it will now.
But do you know what I hear when you say that? And maybe I'm wrong to hear this, but I'll always be honest with you, John. I hear you saying, yeah, all right, I punched myself in the face and I've got a black eye, but bruises fade.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, I mean, as I see it, it's...
I was hoping you'd do a bit more with that, John. I was kind of throwing you the ball there. I thought you were going to make a break for the line with the ball tucked under your arm. I didn't think you were just going to go, oh, yeah, good point, you're right.
Well, let's face it, who's pushing the pound down? It's Germany and France.
Oh, it isn't.
Without a doubt.
No, of course it isn't. It's the markets. It's the markets. It's one of those wonderful days where people who normally spend their life banging on about how important it is to let business do whatever they want, how wonderful unchecked capitalism is, how brilliant unregulated financial services are. You've got to let the market decide. You've got to let the market decide. And then on a day like today, Tesco are apparently awful for, or Unilever are awful for responding to what the markets are doing. John, you're right. And actually, if I've had a few more years on the clock, I'd be a bit more sanguine about everything. But I worry about my children. I wonder how long it's going to take before that self-inflicted bruise starts to fade. But you're right. They do fade, usually.
And I mean, it swings and roundabouts. There's those that are going to say it's time for us to have some of the icing on the cake now. You know, those with the guest houses and the hotels around our coast. they're going to start having a piece of the action now.
I think your rose-tinted spectacles have just gone into overdrive there. I really do. But again, I'll take it. I'd rather have a bit of optimism, I guess, than the pessimism that is evinced by just glancing, for example, at the front page of the Financial Times, another newspaper that has been maligned by the Daily Mail, actually personally attacking the editor of the Financial Times. This is a liberal democracy. If you've got a problem with the word liberal, just focus on the word democracy. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press. It's one of the few. We don't even have a free press really anymore because so much of it is owned by so few people, most of whom are non-doms when it comes to their own tax arrangements. But the Financial Times, internationally regarded newspaper, getting attacked, told to shut up by other journalists. It's incredible. And anyway, just a quick glance at the front page. Weakened pound hits record depths. UK faces €20 billion Brexit divorce bill in Brussels budget wrangle. And Tesco pulls Marmite from sale as slide-in sterling sparks fight with Unilever. Talking the country down with those pesky facts. Do you remember years ago? We had a caller, it was when we were having fun with a UKIP phone-in. We had a caller who actually said out loud, on air, we recorded it, you can do whatever you want with, you can prove anything you want with facts. I'm going to stick to my opinions, thank you very much. And that's now Britain in 2016. Pesky facts, pesky expertise, pesky knowledge, pesky information, pesky statistics, pesky proof. I've got my feelings, thank you very much. And there's an awful lot of people getting rich and famous, fanning the flames of my fury. And I'm going to stay furious. I wonder where it ends. Martin's in Hackney. Martin, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi. I thought I should call in because I don't think the UK is... Well, I think the UK has been lied to about the referendum.
Go on.
It wasn't about the NHS or immigration or Turkey's membership or anything like that. I think the whole premise of the referendum was a lie. I think it had nothing to do with the EU at all. And anyone who has any knowledge of what was going on in Westminster or been following politics for the last 5 years should know it's actually more about tipping about the balance of power in the Conservative Party.
I understand that, but they didn't know that they were going to win. That's the only problem I have with your theory, is I don't think Theresa May thought that she was going to be Prime Minister now, and I don't think that Boris Johnson and Michael Gove thought they were going to win. You could see that on their face, couldn't you, the morning after?
I think Alan Duncan, I think he said that Boris Johnson just wanted to be seen as the sort of darling activist to the party.
It would have placed him perfectly for a takeover subsequent to David Cameron's premiership.
Precisely. And if you look at Liam Fox, who was sacked, I think it was 2011, he's always had a grudge against David Cameron. So has IDS. Boris kept at arm's length from Cameron and Osborne. David Davis lost the leadership battle against Cameron. So this wasn't actually about the EU membership at all. This was a referendum.
They all have.
It's more about tipping a balance of power in the party.
Yeah, the facts back up your theory in some ways, but they were all of the people you mentioned have been staunchly Eurosceptic long before they had any falling out with David Cameron or George Osborne.
Yeah, sure.
And it may be that you're right, but it isn't the only analysis of the situation, I think.
Well, yeah, if you're a politician, though, you've got to be opportunistic, and this is a party that's now led by UKIP, by the nose.
So what? Hang on, let me try and rephrase what you said so that I understand it better. It's not so much that they saw an opportunity to land some massive punches on their political enemies,
Precisely.
And they probably didn't realise they were going to get a knockout. But the reason they piled in the way that they did was to land as many punches as possible for political, personal reasons rather than patriotic or national ones.
Yeah, it was for their own careers rather than the UK's interests.
I'm glad you did ring in. I see why you felt compelled to. I certainly think that the historians of the future, I'm looking forward to Tim Shipman's book in particular, the political editor of the Sunday Times, who really has it to the ground. That's imminently hitting bookstores. There are 2 or 3 other ones as well, but that I think is going to be top of my wish list. 0345 6060973 is the number you need. If James was any more one-sided, he'd be a cardboard cutout. I'm speaking up for you. If you think that your life isn't getting worse at the moment, then ring me and tell me on 0345 6060973. If your life is getting worse, if you are going to have to pay more for stuff, then there aren't 2 sides to that argument, my friend. There are not 2 sides to that argument. The price of petrol is going up. You don't then invite someone on to tell you that it isn't. Do you see what I mean? I don't invite some bloke who used to run a petrol station to come on and say, well, I don't think the price of petrol is actually going up. You can't be two-sided when you're describing a 168-year low in the pound. You can invite someone on to tell you that it's not bad, as the young entrepreneur did. That's fine. That's great. It's not bad. But 168 years? Richard's in Rugby. Richard, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. Second time caller.
You're very welcome. You don't have to keep count.
No, I'm gonna.
Go on, then.
I'll start first of all. I remember my school reports always said easily led.
Yes.
But more to the point, I didn't start listening to LBC actually until after Brexit.
Okay.
Knowing what I know now, I'll put my hands up now and say I made a mistake. I feel stupid, James.
You're not stupid.
I feel like I'm articulate. I'm well read, but to be sucked in by these lies. I'm ex-forces, and I thought, you know what? It's almost as if I said, to be patriotic, you've got to vote Brexit.
Yes.
I love the NHS. To love the NHS, you've got to vote Brexit because we're going to give them all this money. But also, I feel let down by the Remain campaign.
Yes.
Because throughout the whole of the campaign for Remain or Leave or for Brexit, all I ever saw was the Brexit campaign. Why didn't the Remain campaign step up and try harder?
Part of the reason is the media. So I think you're right. I think the Remain campaign was complacent and misguided and in many ways inadequate. But don't forget what the newspapers were doing and what most people in my kind of work were doing. They were putting so much effort into this and punting out those meaningless sound bites about taking back control. And I don't want you or Johnny or anyone else to describe themselves or to feel that they are stupid, because there's nothing stupid about believing people you trust.
Exactly. The problem, the penny dropped a while back, and it's been rattling around for ages. And it took me a few weeks to actually get the moral fibre and the backbone to say I was wrong.
Yeah.
And I voted wrong. I voted. It wasn't about. I mean, the other day, I think a couple of days back, there was a guy when you said to him, name the law that you want to change. Absolutely. And I was one of those guys who sat there and said, yeah, we'll take back control. And I'm thinking, what the bloody hell does that... Sorry, pardon my friend.
That's quite
what does that mean, James?
Yeah.
What does that mean, take back control? I'm a lorry driver. All I know is diesel prices are going to go up, so that means that my boss is going to pay more in diesel. That means I'm not going to get a pay rise.
And your shopping's going to cost more.
Yeah, well, Mrs. does that, but all these people that take back control, they don't even know what it means, James.
I love you, mate. I need you in my life, Richard. I need you in my life, because you just describe what I presume is happening to lots and lots of people, but that phrase you just used, you've got to find the backbone to admit it. That's a beautiful thing.
How many people are listening to me now, talking to you, thinking, do you know what, we're the same as Rich?
Yeah.
But lots. I can't admit it to myself. My lad's 13, right? When he's older, I mean, he's getting to an age now, I will apologise to him. I will say sorry to him. I mean, I've never been a Conservative voter. Theresa May has been handed this unenviable task. I really wish her the best of luck. I don't know what she goes with.
Everybody has to. I don't like the look of what she's doing, but she might have a plan up her sleeve that the likes of us haven't been able to discern yet.
Yes, mate. I don't know. I just feel like how many people just feel the same way as me now, and how different it would be if there was a vote now.
I can tell you what you've just done. That's why they're doing it, isn't it? Because that's why you have to have the front pages saying, silence the whingers, damn the unpatriotic Remainers, damn them, silence them, because otherwise people like you will find the confidence to tell the truth.
Do you know what?
You have to create an atmosphere in which you're never going to admit what you've done. You're never going to put your hands up, because they're creating such a toxic reception for you that you...
Sorry.
That's all right. No, I'm sorry to interrupt you interrupting me.
when I voted Brexit, and see, I'm in the lorry all week. My missus rings me up in the morning. We're out, and then I was like, yes. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. Straight away. Whoa, what have we done? Did you see?
Mate,
Did you see? Don't feel bad. Did you see how many people, the morning the result dropped, actually Googled what does it mean? What is the EU? Presumably an awful lot of people who just voted to leave it went, oh, hang on a minute. What have we done?
I was one of those people, James. Because I wanted, secretly, thinking back now, I wanted to be that person when we stayed in Europe to say, well, I voted out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now, I'm not a race. My partner, she's mixed race.
Yeah.
My extended family on her side are all different nationalities, from Canada to Malaysia.
Yeah.
I don't know, mate.
Should we hug it out?
Yeah.
Let's hug it out.
Seriously, I've got a lump in my throat and I've got a tear in my eye. I'm just worried, and I don't. It takes a lot to admit it.
It does take a lot to admit it. I'm losing the phone line, and it shouldn't take a lot to admit it. But again, we're back to the atmosphere of toxicity that they're creating. If they're trying to silence people for simply pointing out problems and asking questions, that's why Richard employs a phrase I didn't think I'd hear about having to find a backbone, having to find the backbone in order to admit that you'd made a mistake. Richard, mind how you go. Happy driving. 11. The question is fairly straightforward. As just glancing at when did the Financial Times become controversial? It's just as a mark of how mad we've allowed things to become by letting a few very self-interested billionaires and their spewing lapdogs direct the country's travel for, best part of a decade now. How did we let the Financial Times become something that's even controversial? The rest of the world looks to it as almost as a Bible for financial matters. We've got newspapers in this country now describing it as some sort of corrupt hotbed of bias. Financial Times front page. Weakened pound hits record depth. Sterling's 168-year low. UK faces €20 billion Brexit divorce bill in Brussels budget wrangle. And Tesco pulls Marmite from sale as slide-in sterling sparks fight with Unilever. And if the words don't work for you, they've even got some pictures and some graphs. How have we allowed this to happen to us? Richard's call will stay with us all, I think, for a very long time. 11:38 is the time now. Jill's in Edgware. Jill, what's on your mind?
Well, I just want to start by saying, James, I've listened to you for a very, very long time. And, the passion that you speak with comes across loud and clear. And I love you for it.
But
I just want to take you back to the Iraq War. And you were very passionate then.
No, I wasn't.
You were.
No, I wasn't.
No, you were. If I remember,
I went on the Stop the War march, and then sort of about a week later found myself thinking I've fallen for the notion that if you've got 10 murderous dictators lined up against a wall and you can only kill one of them, you should kill one of them. But I was wrong.
Well, I must have been listening to you when you had a change of heart. In that case.
Yes, but it's probably not that relevant to this conversation.
Well, it kind of is.
Well, no, it kind of isn't, because the Iraq War was built upon the existence of weapons that were not there, and we now know that they weren't there. Today's conversation is about the plummeting pound and the rise in prices that we can see in front of us with our own eyes. We don't need Hans Blix or the United Nations or anybody else.
Except the common strand for me is your passion. It's the same passion that you demonstrated then that's coming across loud and clear now.
Okay.
But my point is, there is that slight possibility.
I can't help being passionate, Jill. I'm a very passionate man.
In all that, I know that, and I love you. I said I love
like
you
Donald
for
Trump.
it.
No, I want you to be right. I want this to pass and everything comes out all right. I really do. I'd be mad not to. I'd be masochistic not to. But come on, look at the rooms.
But the point is, I know that we are of this microwave generation where everything's got to happen instantly and it should all be fine.
Yes.
But no, we've taken a huge, huge, huge decision here. And we all have to hold our nerve.
But the people
it's going to be really painful for some time.
How long? How long?
To my mind, I'm saying 10 years in my head.
Well, but no one told us that before the vote.
But But James...
They told us it would be better. People like Richard voted thinking either that they wouldn't win and they'd be able to say, well, I was on the right side of history, but unfortunately history didn't agree with me. They were not told they were going to get punched in the face for 10 years before things might get better, were they? And if they had been told that, they wouldn't have voted in the way that they did.
But the truth is, nobody could have given you a concrete forecast as to how things were going to be. And anybody that attempted
you just go to the experts and ask their opinion. And what happened to them?
Well, I mean, it's...
What do you do when you're ill? Do you go to a doctor? Or do you go to the Mail Online?
Well, some might say you go to a chemist.
Well, no, you need to be diagnosed first. And anyway, stop splitting hairs. Do you go to a chemist or do you go to Mail Online? You go to a qualified professional. Or do you go to a newspaper columnist? Do you go to the governor of the Bank of England for economic advice? Or do you go to a radio talk show host?
Yeah, but you're failing to see that a lot of these people, they speak from whatever side it is that they're...
They don't. No, they don't. A central banker speaks only from the position of objectivity and charged with the responsibility of protecting our economy and our currency. So when a central banker of Mark Carney's stature stands up and says, I have fears and I believe that this and this could conceivably happen, only an idiot puts their fingers in their ears and says, actually, I'm going to listen to Nigel Farage instead, Jill.
Lie.
Pardon?
That's my point. He was always going to toe the political narrative.
Mate, I can't. It's not a political. He's a central banker. He's an independent central banker. His job is to protect the pound and to protect our economy. I mean, I'm glad that you love me so much, and I'm glad that you know I can't break through to somebody who thinks that Mark Carney was deliberately lying in order to achieve some unidentified political goal.
Children to clothe and feed, no doubt. He's got to keep his job. And if keeping his job means he's going to toe the government narrative, then that's what to do.
Okay. So what, fine. So you can never believe a word that he ever says about anything.
You've got to treat it cautiously.
No, you don't treat... There's some people who you don't treat cautiously. You don't have to believe everything they tell you, but to accuse him of being a liar, which is what you've just done, makes you sound a bit mad. But it's very popular and fashionable at the moment, so don't feel bad about it. Lee's in Walthamstow. Lee, what on earth is going on, mate?
Joe, what? The last lady's right down my brain in, to be honest.
Yeah, me too.
I'm just a working class sort of guy, you know what I mean? At the bottom of the barrel sort of thing, just day by day living. Yes. And I voted out, you know what I mean? I listened to all the tabloids and all that was blown up about the NHS, about immigration. I'm not about kicking everyone out. I'm not a racist in that sense. You know, I'm quite happy to keep everyone here, but just close the gate as such. But, you know, the thing that's done me the most is I can't understand why the people that were obviously doing the voting didn't really try and persuade us. You know, I know I'm one of the naive people. I'm not an idiot. I'm naive. I'm not very big on the politic world. I've only really started listening over the last few months, etc. Yeah. I'm only a 30-year-old guy, you know what I mean? Like a young guy sort of trying to sort of find his feet and that. I'm just so baffled how bad this has got so quick.
Me too.
I'm right up against it. I'm getting married next year in Thailand. Everything was all lovely. Yeah, get married abroad because obviously the pound's so strong and it made my wedding cheaper. Yeah. Now it's just gone the total opposite other way. It puts me under more pressure, etc., to try and find more money because I just didn't realise how much this was going to cripple us.
And when Mark Carney warned us that it would, people like the last lady heard someone deliberately pursuing a political agenda and deliberately setting out to mislead you. And in fact, anybody who stood up in public and said, these things might happen, these things might happen.
We were all naive, though. The problem was we were naive, and we were just looking at like what we thought was the bigger picture. I think, you know what I mean. To be able to sit there and press a reset button now would be my dream. You know what I mean. To actually listen to the so-called professionals, etc. These people that were advising us how this was going to go, and not listen to you know, the things that I thought were important at the time, i.e. the NHS. You know, we're going to be funded and things like that. You know, and things like that going to start coming alive. We generally have been led down a garden path. And there's nothing we can do about it now as far as...
I don't know about that. I don't know if there's nothing we can do about it. It depends on whether or not the people responsible for leading you down the garden path are successful in silencing you now, or silencing people who are pointing out what you're pointing out. They're going to give it their best shot. They're going to go after everybody, the Mail and the Express and the Sun. They're not going to take any prisoners now. They can't. Because the only other alternative is for them to put their hands up and say, sorry, we were wrong. And that's never going to happen.
Well, we know that. Like the last lady turned around and said about, oh, yeah, I see us being okay in 10 years. Well, 10 years is a long old time for me. You know what I mean?
Could be onto your third wife by then, Lee.
Yeah, I probably don't say that to her.
No, it's a joke.
What
It's
you
a
meant
joke.
to do for 10 years?
I don't
10
know.
years is a long old time. Yeah, I mean, I expect you maybe.
But they'll all be all right. They'll be all right. Farage will have his European Parliament pension. The sort of Ian Duncan Smiths of this world will have directorates. They'll be sitting on boards. They'll all be fine, mate.
That's what I mean. No one's really thought of the people at the bottom of that. You know what I mean?
And yet the whole campaign was conducted by middle-class and upper-class liars claiming that they were speaking for people like you.
Exactly. That's where I think we feel hard done by.
I think
all
you're
my
right.
friends are builders and things like that, and we all grabbed onto the immigration thing. You know what I mean? A lot of us did. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but we didn't really sort of understand what we were doing. None of us really normally vote. You know what I mean? You'll see this. Most people come out and vote, etc., just for the sake of it. And Joey, what a mistake we've done. You know what I mean?
Well, it feels that way, but we can. The one thing everybody can agree on is that we all hope, however we voted, that Lee is wrong and the Financial Times is wrong, and Richard, who called in earlier, was wrong, and Johnny in Limehouse is wrong, and all the people who have got the guts, have got the stones to stand up and say, I think I might have just done a boo-boo. We all hope they're wrong. Whereabouts in Thailand are you getting wed?
Koh Samui.
You're going to have a blast, mate. You really are.
I think. Listen, 3 weeks away from here, so.
That's a bonus anyway, even without the wedding. But I was there earlier this year and saw a couple of weddings, and I'd never got it before. I never got why you'd want to do it on the other side of the world. But getting wed in Thailand on a beach, yeah, well, crikey, at least you'll be able to forget all your worries. It's 11:47. It's strange when we have spent so much of the morning talking about what happens when propaganda and demagogues are allowed to ride roughshod over reality and truth. The other big story on some of the front pages today, of course, involves Lily Allen, who has done something really despicable and disgusting. She's actually travelled to Calais to meet people before arriving at any conclusions about them. Clearly nobody told her that you don't need to do that. You can get all the opinions you need from the Mail Online or from the Daily Express. 11:52 is the time, and I'm delighted to say that Lily is on the line now. Lily, what were you thinking of? Why can't you just get your information from the newspapers like everybody else?
I've got enough experience with the newspapers to know not to believe anything that I read in them, really. So that was my main reason for going, was to see the situation for myself, because we are being sort of fed a very one-dimensional view on the whole situation, and that was my reasoning.
What did you find when you got there?
A lot of very desperate people living in really horrible conditions, not knowing what their future holds, which is a terrifying prospect for anyone, especially the 1,022 unaccompanied children that are currently residing in that particular camp.
And the urgent question is, what happens to them if the evictions that are planned go ahead? Did you get any answers to that?
I think the evictions are planned for next week on the 17th, yes. I believe, and there are no plans. They go off the grid. They go missing. Who knows where they go? Maybe they go into the sex slave industry. Maybe they walk back into the hands of terrorists. I mean, who knows? Who knows what happens to them? But they definitely go missing.
You expect to get a kicking on social media whenever you put your head above the parapet doing something disgraceful like being compassionate and honest. But you've been surprised to actually see so-called journalists joining in, actually proper professionals joining in this sort of witch hunt of you for having the audacity to look at things with your own eyes?
No, I'm not surprised at all. In fact, I expected it. I think, what they seem to have picked up on is that I apologised on behalf of the nation, but, it was an emotional moment that I was affected by. Perhaps I could have chosen my words better and said, I apologise for the part the country I come from has played in the yes. situation that you're currently experiencing. But that was what I said, and that's what's been picked up on, and is being used to support the xenophobic rhetoric and narrative that we are currently experiencing, and especially in the mainstream press.
I think the fact that you live in a quite an expensive house with your children also disqualifies you from commenting on the plight of refugees in Calais. I don't know if you've picked up on that.
Well, my expensive house, I don't actually live there anymore, so I can't really defend the fact that I've earned some money and have spent it on accommodation. I'm sorry about that.
Last question, I promise, because I know you're busy. how do you process it? A lot of people listening, whether they approve or disapprove of what you've done, they'll be imagining how they'd cope with being on the receiving end, A, of the emotional barrage you experienced firsthand in Calais, and then B, the media barrage that you've been exposed to since. Does it never make you want to just sort of keep your head down and not cause problems?
No, not at all, because I think that there are, people are outraged, quite rightly, because they're, experiencing some horrific and cuts and austerity in this country. I don't berate these people for having this kind of opinion. They're being fed a lie by the media, and they're reacting in what they see as an appropriate fashion. There's nothing. I mean, I do find issue with it, but I don't blame anyone. There's desperate people in this country, but it's not refugees that are the problem. It's this government and the cuts and the austerity.
It may well be. I don't think you would be too surprised to hear that there's quite a lot of support for you coming in via social media, and of course quite a lot of criticism as well. But I suspect that you've got plenty of your own without me needing to share any of it with you. Lily, will you go back? Do you think? Can you imagine doing anything similar again?
Well, I think that I probably won't be going back to Calais, because Calais...
It's not going to be there, is it? No.
But there are camps in Greece, in Lesbos. There's, I think, 60 or 90,000 people currently residing in refugee camps in Greece, 9,000 of which are pregnant currently, going into the winter, camping in a tent, being... pregnant, as you can imagine, is quite a distressing situation. So yeah, I hope to join Help Refugees and go over there and provide some more, I don't know, help.
I mean, do you know, weirdly, if you weren't getting a coating from the papers today, you wouldn't have had the opportunity to make the points that you've just made.
Yes, exactly.
So it's what they might call a trade-off. Lily Allen, you'll always be welcome to make similar points, and indeed any other pertinent points on this programme. But in the meantime, many thanks for your time, and have a great day. It's 11:57. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Have we got Theo Usherwood before the news, or are we cracking straight on with Mystery Hour?
I'm here.
Here he is.
I'm here,
mate, I had Lily Allen on the line a minute ago. Now I've got boring old you.
Yeah, I'll always play second fiddle to Lily Allen.
What's going on? Foreign Affairs.
Yes, Foreign Affairs. Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, in front of MPs today to give evidence on the government's foreign policy. And now you will remember, listeners will remember from that referendum campaign, one of the big arguments put forward by the Leave campaign was that we don't necessarily need to trade with the EU. We've got the Commonwealth, we've got those links, and so the pro-Brexit MP Andrew Rossendale started by asking Mr Johnson whether he knew what the Commonwealth flag looked like.
Most people, and I think including John Kerry, feel that the process of discussion with the Russians has basically run out of road. I'm not going to pretend that there is any easy answer here, because there isn't. But I think most people are now changing their minds about this, and they're thinking, we can't let this go on forever. We can't just see Aleppo pulverised in this way. We have to do something. And I thought the mood of the House of Commons the other day was very telling. I think it has changed. Whether that means we can get the coalition together for more kinetic action now, I cannot prophesy.
That was the apologies there, James. That was the wrong clip. But Boris Johnson talking up raising the possibility of kinetic action, military action in Syria. There's a meeting of foreign ministers in London to discuss other possibilities because, as Mr Johnson told the committee, discussions with Russia had run out of road. I've just come from a briefing actually with the Prime Minister's spokeswoman, who said that Russia's veto against against concerted action at the United Nations in Syria was evidence that in fact that there was seemingly no way forward when it came to negotiations with Vladimir Putin's country. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens on Sunday and whether they come to some sort of agreement, although no-fly zones over Syria have been ruled out.
And the domestic political situation with regard to Brexit, I know that we just played the wrong clip, but Boris has effectively been arguing that things are going to come good. The sunny uplands are just around the corner, and of course we all hope he's right. Did he provide any evidence to back up his optimism?
No, he didn't, but it was mood. He was talking mood, and the fact that he said the doomsayers would be proved wrong, although he did warn that there could be a storm and stress along the way. as Britain finds its way through the next at least 2 and a bit years of negotiations.
And David Davis, of course, said there would be absolutely no downside to leaving the European Union. I can't quite remember what Boris's bloviations contained, but I don't remember him saying. Did he say? He did actually say short-term pain for long-term gain, didn't he?
Yes, he did, he was on it straightforward today. He didn't comment on the Unilever Tesco row, but he was upfront in saying that there would be a rocky road ahead, but everything would work out in the end.
You might not be a pop star, Theo, but you got all the hits.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's just turned 12 noon and Mystery Hour is next.